Before we jump into this video, I just wanted to give a little disclaimer for us all. I am a registered dietitian. I am not a certified eating disorder specialist. I do have a background in eating disorders. So I am not able to diagnose or treat eating disorders, and this is really just for educational purposes. And every body is meant to be the way they're supposed to be, right? There's only so much you can change. And when you do change, it's usually not sustainable, right? Your body is meant to be a certain way, and every body is different. No two people are going to be look alike. So my third thing would be try not to compare yourself to others, because everyone's different. And that's the most beautiful thing about, being a human, being a cheerleader too. It's a very accepting community. All different shapes and sizes are involved and allowed to be cheerleaders, and let's celebrate that instead of comparing yourself to one another when it's not realistic to look like someone else. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Cheer Nutritionist YouTube channel. We are so happy to have you here today for NEDA week, which is National Eating Disorder Awareness Week. Before we jump in, I just want to remind you all to subscribe to this page, like this post, comment down below if you have any questions, comments, or concerns. And of course, follow me on Instagram. All my social media is tagged in the description below. So take a look there to stay up to date on new news about the Cheer Nutritionist and new videos and content that's coming out. Before we jump in, I want to introduce you to my beautiful intern, Miss Brooke. She started interning with me in January. She has her master's in applied clinical nutrition, and she's now finishing her other courses to be able to sit for the RD exam and get into a dietetic internship. And fun fact, she's also a mama of a beautiful baby girl. She's 8 months old, and I'm just so excited to have you here, Brooke.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
So it's so great to have you here, Brooke. This is kind of my way to start introducing my interns to you all. And she is going to be interviewing me today because I have experience with disordered eating when it comes to cheerleading. And I thought this would be a great opportunity to share my story. So Brooke is going to be asking me the questions, and let's jump in.
Yes, so I'm so excited to be learning more about your story today. And I guess just to give us and all the listeners a better background before we jump in, could you tell us a little bit more about yourself so we can get to know you better?
Yeah. So I grew up in New Jersey. I was an all-star cheerleader for 10 years, and I found that there was a major lack of nutrition resources in the cheerleading space. I realized this, as an all-star cheerleader, but also in college. I ended up cheering at the University of South Carolina for 4 years, graduated in 2018 with my Bachelor of Science in Exercise Science and a minor in nutrition. And then from finding my passion through internships during my undergrad years, I really found a passion for nutrition. So I went back to school, got my master's degree in nutrition and exercise physiology, sat through my 1 year dietetic internship, and passed the RD exam in September of 2022. And the next week I started the Cheer Nutritionist, which was really bringing my two passions together of cheerleading and nutrition, and providing that nutrition resource that I always thought was lacking.
That's awesome. It sounds like it's definitely an underserved community and a niche community as well. So it's really cool to see all the work you've done and all the work that you're continuing to do.
Thank you.
Yeah. So obviously you have an extensive background in cheerleading. Could you tell us how disordered eating played a role in your cheer journey?
Yeah, for sure. So I started really noticing my disordered eating behaviors starting when I was in high school, around my junior year of high school. I tried out for one of the premier teams in the gym that I was at, and I was heavily influenced by, my surroundings of constantly wearing a sports bra and tight shorts, and having to wear those half top uniforms at practices. on top of, being a girl in high school and experiencing really a poor body image. And a little reminder, this was, between 2010 and 2014. So before there was really a lot of nutrition information out there. And if it was a lot of diets. So I grew up in a family of dieters. It was kind of normal to me. I noticed me getting heavily influenced by that. And this was also the time where there was a lot of, diet pills and a lot of misinformation out there. So unfortunately, I did start using some diet pills. They made me feel really not so great for practices, but I was losing weight and seeing that change, which, further enforced my behaviors. I saw that my body was changing, and those were the changes I thought I wanted at the time, but it was negatively affecting my performance. I fell into the habit of purging, which was really unfortunate. Now looking back on it, I now understand why I have so many stomach issues, because that really messes you up for life. It completely rearranges the way your gut works. And I didn't even realize how bad it was until one of our projects in school senior year was writing a letter to our future self. And I came across that letter, maybe 2 years ago. And I was reading in there some of the things I said. And I think this was really the only place I opened up to. I was talking about how I felt like I was eating too much. I wrote down in there that I had to purge it. And it was really eye-opening to read it so many years later after I have all this knowledge, and really inspired me to do something about it. So that was kind of the beginning of my kind of disordered eating disorder history. A little information for you guys. I am 4'11", so I'm very short, but I was never, ever, ever the type of person who had, that 6-pack abs or that flat stomach. I wasn't born that way. I never, you can never see the 6-pack, but that's all I wanted so badly because all the flyers around me were like that. And being that short, I had a coach tell me that I wasn't going to be able to base at the college level because of how small I was. So I started co-ed flying. And this kind of really exacerbated my disordered eating because now I was going to be in the air for the first time in college too, and with only one male under me. So this further fueled my disordered eating habits once I got to college. Freshman year, I would say I actually gained the freshman 15. So freshman year, it was kind of the opposite of what I was doing in high school because, I was feeding myself for the first time. I was, being a normal college student on top of being a cheerleader. So that freshman 15 was honestly great for me because I needed it. But then I started to go back down the rabbit hole once I was really involved in the team more. Like my freshman year and sophomore year, I didn't make MAT for nationals other than I ended up being an alternate on MAT for all girl, but co-ed, I wasn't on MAT freshman or sophomore year. And all I wanted to do was be on MAT. And the only way I knew how was to heavily restrict myself. Summer going into junior year, I got a personal trainer, which was great for me because I finally learned how to weight lift. I was getting stronger. But then once I got to college, back to school and living on my own again, I was with my parents during the summer, so they were feeding me and stuff. But I was on my own again back at school, working out, and I had more freedom, right? So I started working out 2 times a day. I got a job as a coach at an all-star gym, and I was working out there too, on top of my college practices, and I was barely eating. The thing about me being 4'10" and I've never been underweight was my eating disorder or disordered eating habits went completely unnoticed. I was also very secretive about it at the time and not willing to open up. So I actually remember going to the doctor that year, and he was like, wow, you lost 20 pounds in a very short amount of time. Like, are you eating? Is everything okay? And I just kind of talked it off of, yeah, everything's okay. I'm not underweight. I'm still, you know, I'm still normal weight for my height and size. But now looking back, that is an eating disorder. It should have been flagged. He tried to flag it. So that's kind of good to know that he was trying to help, but I was so secretive about it that, it still went unnoticed. And it took until nationals that year where my mom came up to me and said, Ashley, you're losing too much weight. You don't look okay. Like, you need to get help. Something needs to change. And this is what really sparked my interest in nutrition and eating disorders, because this kind of inspired me to go intern with the sports dietitian. And I learned that what I was doing was not okay. It was not healthy. I ended up tearing my labrum in my hip that year. I was sick all the time. And looking back, noticing the change senior year after my mom told me that, and I started interning with the dietitian and applying that knowledge, it was a world of difference. I still was able to maintain my skills, but I felt so much better at practices, and I started to recover that way. So no, I never was diagnosed with an eating disorder. Obviously, I do have that disordered eating experience, but I never went to treatment for it. I was able to heal myself by becoming a dietitian, if that makes sense.
That's very powerful, that last statement. And that's really cool that your story could be used in that way and you found your passion through that.
Yeah.
You mentioned something that I resonated with, I found very powerful. You mentioned how back in high school, you were making changes for yourself that essentially in your gut, like, lasts forever. And that's one thing that I think, especially as a high schooler, your brain's not fully developed. You're more likely to be a little more impulsive. And especially as an athlete who thrives with competition, you are willing to do anything to get a result, and you might not have the education to know,
Right.
what's safe and what's not. So that's something that I think a lot of cheerleaders don't understand, is that, like, what you are doing, whether it's under eating, misusing diet pills, like, that's dangerous. And I tore my labrum around the same time, I guess the same age that you did too. And that was a result of just under eating and not taking care of myself. So
Yeah,
more powerful than people realize.
100%. I think it's so important to speak to the younger generation about this, exactly because of what you said. It's not just that year that you're harming yourself. It's not even the next 5 years that you're harming your health. It is long term, especially when it gets to a level where you need additional help. So, laxatives, they mess you up for a while. That was something I did that really messed up my stomach. And I still, to this day, I'm now 26, still experience major stomach issues. And it's very hard to recover from that. And I know, as a high schooler, you're not really looking into the future. You're not too worried about your health. You think you're young and fit, but the behaviors and the choices that you're making now affect you more into life than you really know.
100%. And I think what's even harder for some people to understand is, you mentioned your statistics in terms of your height and just disordered eating, eating disorders going under the radar, undiagnosed, partially because they can be sneaky in nature, but also because you don't meet that stereotypical criteria. When you think eating disorder, you think it's a physical manifestation that you can see. So that kind of, I guess, brings me to a point of, if you could elaborate a little bit more on being, like, sick enough for treatment or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's being sick enough, that you just said it right there. Like, if you feel, it doesn't have to be outward, but if there's something in you that, either whether it's negative thoughts of doing these behaviors, or even negative body thoughts, or you find yourself feeling uncomfortable eating around people, you're hiding food in your room from your parents, These little things are all signs. They're all signs that something's going on. You're better off getting the help early on. That's something I wish I did looking back. But I think the bigger picture is here is that we need to have the conversation. We have to open up the conversation, and that's what we're trying to do. Whether you look like the true anorexic, right? Or you are overweight and you're, finding that you're uncontrollably eating. That's another sign. But it could also be that you're restricting and you might not meet all the criteria for an eating disorder. So it goes under the radar and you get away with it. But in reality, you're not getting away with it. You are sick enough to get help at that point. That's actually something called atypical anorexia, where you're restricting, but you don't meet all the criteria for an eating disorder. There's a lot of eating disorders that aren't talked about, that aren't as popular as the ones you think of: anorexia, bulimia. There's also binge eating disorder. There's also ARFID. There's all these other ones. I'm not going to get too deep into it, but just know that if little behaviors like this, negative thoughts about your body, the urge to do these negative behaviors to get your body to a certain way, that's when you are sick enough to get help.
It's very important. So I feel like that's definitely a takeaway point.
For sure.
You definitely are sick enough if you have, it doesn't have to be just like a physical manifestation, like you said. It's not just numbers, it's more than that. It's thoughts, it's behaviors. So in addition to that, do you have any other advice that you would give listeners who have either been through or are going through a similar experience as you?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is knowledge is power. So the more you know about your health, the better. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm trying to educate and prevent these disordered eating behaviors. So my number one tip, reach out to me. I'm here to chat. I want to be a resource for you guys. You can, again, all my links are down below. You can contact me if you notice any of these signs or symptoms, behaviors. Number two, this one's for my coaches out there, coaches and parents. Be mindful. Listen to the conversations that athletes are having at practice. You might be eavesdropping a little bit, but it's super important. If someone comes in saying, oh, all I ate today was a cup of coffee, or Starbucks is the only thing I ate today, or I am going to have to go work out after this to work off the food I just ate. Or parents, you notice food wrappers being hidden in their rooms, or they're more secluded from family meals, or kind of withdrawn from socializing and eating kind of scenarios. These are things to look out for, and then to open up the conversation. Make them feel comfortable having these conversations with you, because it's so important. The best thing I ever did was have that conversation with my mom after she told me that I wasn't looking well. I thank her every day for that. Like, she saved me. And you can be that person for your athletes. And I just think that's so important. Another thing, and this is more for, my cheerleaders that are coming towards the end of their cheer career and even beyond cheerleading. You're not going to be in that uniform forever. You're not going to be a cheerleader forever. In addition to that, your body changes, and it's normal for bodies to change. I think realizing and really being conscious that everyone's bodies change is a huge liberating factor for you. Because, girls and guys, they all go through puberty at this similar times, different times, and everybody is meant to be the way they're supposed to be, right? There's only so much you can change. And when you do change, it's usually not sustainable, right? Your body is meant to be a certain way, and every body is different. No two people are going to be look alike. So my third thing would be, try not to compare yourself to others, because everyone's different. And that's the most beautiful thing about, being a human, being a cheerleader too. It's a very accepting community. All different shapes and sizes are involved and allowed to be cheerleaders, and let's celebrate that instead of, comparing yourself to one another when like it's not realistic to look like someone else.
I love that. That is so true and so important. And I feel, especially in cheerleading, with it being an aesthetic sport, it's so easy to compare yourself like physically to others. But if we play into our strengths and just honor what our body is capable of, and instead of going against nature and going against the grain, you are definitely going to see better results all
Mm,
around the board. 100.
100%.
So, in addition to that awesome advice, if you look back on your journey with disordered eating, especially in the cheer world, what are some certain things that stood out to you that you see as red flags that maybe contributed a little bit?
Well, a big thing that I need to mention is genetics. So, genetics plays a big role in not only how our bodies are supposed to be, but also in eating disorder behaviors. Probably like 80% of it's genetic. So, that's something that ran in my family. So, in that way, I was predisposed. Other than that, it's kind of just the environment, the culture, being that it is an appearance sport. We are being judged on the way we look. We are being judged on the way we do our skills from a subjective standpoint. That's something we can't change. But what we can change is how we talk to our athletes about that, how we talk to each other as athletes and teammates about that stuff. And also, not reminding ourselves that we're athletes. I think that's the biggest thing. Just like a football player has to eat a pregame meal and during halftime and after the game, we have to do that same thing because we need to fuel our bodies. And that's something I wasn't doing. And I felt it. I got hurt. I had to get surgery. And, it ultimately ended my career. And that's something we don't want, right? We want to be in the sport for as long as possible. So for those who are struggling with this, I would say, get help when you can. Talk to someone about it. Talk to your coaches about it. Talk to someone you feel safe with. And, really remind yourself that you are an athlete and need to fuel yourself like the athlete you are.
So, you mentioned having athletes, cheerleaders talk to their coaches and having that be a safe space. So I feel like it's important to mention that the education aspect, like, yes, that does fall on the cheerleader, but any coaches, parents listening, registered dietitians are resources to you too. It's so important to get quality information to educate yourself on basic nutrition principles, eating disorders, that way you know the red flags, what to look out for. So that's really important, I think. And
100%.
yeah. So still on the topic of disordered eating, like your experience, what do you think ultimately helped heal you? Because you mentioned that you didn't seek traditional treatment.
Yeah, the biggest thing was getting involved in the nutrition space. Once I knew too much, I realized like, oh my God, I need to, fix myself. And in this case, I was gaining the knowledge to be able to do so. But for, those who aren't going into the nutrition field, that's where, registered dietitians come in and we can help you. Also, a big thing I tell all my clients is to find the good people on social media to follow. I know we're all on social media. Make sure you're getting your nutrition information from trusted sources. Like Brooke said earlier, registered dietitians. I'm here specifically for cheerleaders, so I can be a great resource for you guys, but also unfollowing the people that, are contributing to that negative body image. Like I said earlier, comparison is a big one. And a lot of people on social media, their life isn't really what they make it seem to be. So if there's someone that you follow on social media that is contributing to your own negative body image, click that unfollow button. It's not serving you in a good way. And that's something I did. And that really helped me during my healing.
That's great advice, especially during National Eating Disorder Awareness Week. Not only from like accounts that might trigger you, but also accounts that you follow for good intentions for nutrition advice. And this goes within any professional field. It's so easy and relatively uncensored and unmonitored to put out information. do your research and look for what credentials you should be searching for. So again, in the case of nutrition, that is a registered dietitian. That's a legally recognized field. So I think that's great advice.
100%.
Kind of transitioning from healing yourself from disordered eating, that little gray area of in between of, okay, what's next? How do I move on? So you're obviously still involved in the cheer space, fitness, health, and wellness industry. What is that transition like being in this field after struggling with disordered eating?
Yeah, so at first it was a pretty hard transition. Because anyone leaving cheerleading, right? It ends at some point, unfortunately. It's not one of those sports where you can really do it your whole life. If you do, I'm jealous. Um, but one thing I really struggled with once I first started is not having that schedule anymore. I didn't have practices Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 8 to 9 or 7 to 9. I didn't have a gym to go to necessarily to tumble and do privates and, open stunt, all that stuff. So I felt like this, what do I do now? One thing that really helped this transition for me was finding exercises I enjoyed. For the first time, I had this freedom of being able to, really enjoy the exercise, because a lot of the conditioning and strength training we do in practices is sometimes used for punishment, or it has like a negative connotation to it. So I got to experiment with a bunch of different exercise classes, go to the gym for myself for the first time. So that was the first time I really enjoyed working out. And that was huge for me. And, during the time I was applying my knowledge that I was learning, I was, eating before my workouts, eating after, and noticing the differences and experimenting. And this was all really fun to me because I'm obviously interested in it. And now my biggest thing is, I'm giving back to this community. Like, that is my why. And that's why I'm here. As a dietitian for cheerleaders, is I don't want anyone to experience what I went through. So I'm here to help you through that transition. I've been through it. I can relate to you. And now being in the field, I just find it so empowering to be able to share my story, but also to teach the younger generation about this stuff, because I know it needs to be done. And I'm really happy to just be the first one doing it. Yes, the transition was hard. My biggest advice: push through, find the exercises you enjoy, find the foods you enjoy. There's so much joy out of eating, and there's so many benefits other than just getting stronger or losing weight with exercise that I think you'll find once you leave cheerleading. So it's something to look forward to. Don't be too worried about it.
That's really empowering to see your full 360 transition into redefining your relationship with not only food, but exercise too, because a lot of people who struggle with disordered eating, eating disorders, they might not have the healthiest relationship with exercise. And especially in cheer, like you said, with conditioning, you might be strength training for an end goal. Like, I am doing this for XYZ purpose. Everything has a purpose, everything is regimented. Right. So for the first time in your life, you had freedom, and that's what this is all about. So that's really cool.
Yeah, something I really loved right after I finished my career was, one, I got into Orange Theory, which it still had that coaching like a practice would, but the workouts were fun and exciting, high energy. Loved that environment. I also loved doing Zumba. Also now I got introduced to Cheer Fit training, which is a great way to stay in the cheer space. The workouts are literally amazing. I was shocked the first time I did it. I didn't think it was going to be as hard as it was, but they kind of bring back the cheerleader in you. So that was a good one. I love. I've still to this day, I'm obsessed with Pilates. I find it's more gentle on the body. It's fun. It's more relaxing, but you still get a good sweat out of it. And then also just movement in general, walks, I love that stuff. those are some things I enjoyed as a former cheerleader. You guys can comment below some exercises you enjoy doing and some foods you like. That would be great.
Yeah, it sounds like from what I've heard others say too, just being in the collegiate athletics space, group fitness is a great transition.
Yeah.
If you feel out of control, like what's next? You graduate, your career is transitioning, you're in a different phase of life.
Mhm.
Sometimes like there's still competitive aspects to it. Sometimes there's not, there's definitely classes out there. That's how I found cycle bar. I started doing spin classes, but on the flip side, there's also more gentle things like you said, Pilates, hot yoga, and cheer fit training is a great way to still keep cheer in your life.
Yeah.
So it's awesome.
Love it.
So you've learned many lessons from your journey as a cheerleader. What would you say was the biggest one that shaped who you are today?
Man, this is the hardest question. And I think we should leave it off on this one because it's such a great one. I would say the biggest lesson I learned, other than time management, which I use every day in work today, the confidence, I think, that you get from being a cheerleader. You are, the star of the show. Every individual person gets to be the star of the show in that moment. And having that confidence take you through life, it's almost like that fake it till you make it mindset. But, it's one of those really important lessons that really got me to where I am today, especially being the only dietitian that's focusing on cheerleaders. I know what I'm talking about. I know I can do this. These are things that were ingrained in my head from a very young age. And being able to tell myself that and know it might not always be true, but it's, confidence is key for life. On the other hand, another big lesson I learned is the importance of teammates and communication. I got to be captain of both my all-star program and my college program my senior year. And being that leader in that leadership role really teaches you a lot going into life. Communication is something you'll use in every scenario in your life going forward, and being able to take that lesson and apply it to your everyday life is so important. I'm still friends with a lot of the people I cheered with. They are, family. You spend so much time with them. So I would say keeping up with those people, keeping up with those friendships is so important in life. We're one of a kind of people, I think. I can't even put it into words what we do. I mean, all sports in general, they teach you so many lessons, but being the sport that it is, that, we're not just the pretty face. We also put a lot of hard work and dedication into what we do, and we do it because we love it. And that's something you can relate to those people on your team for the rest of your life. So I think the biggest thing I learned was really confidence, leadership, time management, and keeping those important people in your life for life, because, they've been with you through hard times, and you have a lot in common with them. And I just think that's so important going into life after cheer.
Those are great skills, confidence, leadership. Those are all transferable skills like later in life. And I think just to sum it all up, that's why it's so important to take care of your body and speak up and seek help if you need it. So that way you can, show up 100% in all walks of life. And then in community, you mentioned like cheerleaders are one of a kind, and you guys are also passionate, and you should lean on each other, find your people, stick with them. And it's so much bigger than the sport at the end of the day. You're going to have these people for life. Like you said, you're not always going to be in that uniform.
100%. And for me, having this secret eating disorder for a lot of my cheer career, that's something I talk to my cheer friends about now. And I wish I opened up to them then and talked about it then, because a lot of them say, wow, I had no idea. The next part of, wow, I had no idea, I was going through the same thing. That's why I feel like the communication of it all is so important, because you can trust those people for the most part. They are your ride or dies. They know what you're going through. They've been there, and having those conversations is a world of a difference.
100%. So, final question to wrap everything up. We've touched on this a little bit, but if you could give just one piece of advice to the younger cheerleaders who are seeking to either be collegiate cheerleaders or maybe even elite all-star, what piece of advice would you give them?
Never give up and prioritize your health as much as possible. I say never give up because you're not always going to get a skill on your first try. You're not always going to get a job on your first try in the future. You're not always going to be able to, pass that test or exam to your 100% degree. Like, you're not always going to get that A. But when you never give up and push forward, you'll get there. And a big part of that is, having the energy, having the ability to do those things and be able to put the hard work in. And that comes from nutrition. So that's something we'll talk about a lot more on this page. Nutrition advice. Also, I always post on Instagram. And I'll be starting my Facebook community and opening up questions, and that will be great as well. But again, health, prioritizing that from a young age, trust me, you'll thank me later. You will thank me when you're old and gray and wanting to get the most out of your life. Health will do that. Everyone has to take care of their bodies, especially athletes. And those are just my final thoughts.
Well, Ashley, thank you so much for sharing your story. I know that resonated with so many people, and this will help so many cheerleaders moving forward, as well as coaches and parents.
Yep. I'm really excited about this. Thank you so much, Brooke, for doing this interview with me. You are a great intern. I love working with you. And I think this was a really important conversation. And like you said, I think it will resonate even more than we realize. So again, thank you for being here. And thank you to all my listeners for listening. Again, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, turn your notifications on. And as always, follow me on Instagram at the Cheer Nutritionist.